The year was 2023. I had just beat the Pokemon League using a level 20 Linoon and was confident I had found the ultimate strategy, unless you had god tier RNG. But something felt off. Was this really the best I could do? Could I beat the Elite Four at level 5? I had to find out. Here are the rules. I can only use Pokemon and items from Gen 3, but no cheats or RNG manipulation. The Pokemon must be level 5. The strategy must be realistically repeatable, no 1 in 1,000 RNG. I'm allowing myself the cloning glitch for convenience to get more Leppa berries that restore PP and some PP max to increase the total move power points. Impossible, you say? Not long ago I would agree, until I found a move that completely outsmarts and cripples the AI. I challenge you to try and guess what it is, because it's most likely not what you think. But for it to make sense, let's go over some strategy. The first Pokemon from each member loves starting with status moves. Mariana has Sand Attack, Dusclops has Protect, Celio has Hail, and Shelgon Protect, and Wailord has Rain Dance. However, if one or more of their moves will one-hit KO, they will always attack instead. This is unfortunate, but also useful information that will come in handy for the strategy. So, we have to survive turn 1 somehow, and still avoid being taken out every turn afterwards. Sidney's first Pokemon, Mightyena, has Crunch and Double Edge as their attacking moves, which covers all the type immunities and is faster than any level 5 Pokemon. These moves will one-hit KO anything at level 5 and have 100% accuracy, so there are only a few options that allow us to survive the first turn. Quick Claw, Bright Powder, and Focus Band. Holding any of these items would allow us to either go first, make the opponent miss, or survive a hit that would KO. Okay, great. We have a way to potentially survive turn 1, but we still gotta survive and take out 26 Pokemon. So here are some strategies you might be thinking of. Focus Sash. Well, it's not available in Gen 3, so the famous Focus Sash Endeavor Quick Attack trick won't work, and Focus Band is too unreliable, as it only procs 10% of the time. Sturdy ability with Endeavor and Shell Bell, well, it works in the later generations, but in Gen 3, Sturdy only protects against actual one-hit KO moves like Fissure, Sheer Cold, and Guillotine. Prankster ability, or Trick Room, well, also doesn't exist in Gen 3. One of the first things I tried was a Smeargle using Spore, Double Team, Substitute, and Dragon Rage. As I found out that Spore can hit grass types in Gen 3, this instantly made me believe I could win easily. I thought that all I would have to do was put their first Pokemon to sleep, set up X speeds to become faster, then hide behind a substitute while setting up evasion stacks through Double Team, Spore anytime they would wake up, and use Dragon Rage to slowly chip away at their health, as Dragon Rage always deals 40 damage and can hit all their Pokemon. I jumped with joy thinking, could it really be that simple? Barged into the Elite Four corridors with my level 5 Smeargle thinking it should be an easy sweep. I got past Sidney, but then...
Yeah, I think we're out of Leppa Bears by the end of this, What?
I was so focused on their typing and the fact that grass wouldn't be immune that I completely forgot to check their abilities. So I did my homework, looked through their abilities, and then I realized that the Pokemon chosen for the Elite Four was no coincidence. Not only did they have immunity to Sleep, Flinch, Stat Reduction, and Infatuation, but also 6 Pokemon with moves that won't check accuracy, meaning evasion would not be as easy as it first may have seemed. And even worse, I discovered that if I had evasion stacks, those Pokemon would always go for evasion bypassing moves. I started feeling like Game Freak specifically designed the Elite Four to make this challenge impossible. So I went back to the drawing board, and not long after, I would discover the one move that would blow my mind. It's a move you probably never used ever. Let me know in the comments what you guessed. The move is Torment. This has to be the most broken move that nobody ever used. Torment prevents the target from using the same move twice in a row. This means they could not use their accuracy bypassing moves more than half the time. Also, quite a few of their Pokemon use only 2 different attacking moves. And as you can see, some of these are even normal type moves. What would happen if I used a ghost Pokemon with Torment against Sidney? Mariana would try to use Crunch first turn. And if I'm able to dodge their Crunch with Bright Powder and use Torment, they can only attack us every other turn, since as a ghost type we are immune to their Double Edge. Every other turn I could simply set up a substitute if necessary, and heal or set up Double Team and X-Speeds on the turn they can't attack. Not only would Torment completely cripple Mariana, but also their Crawdaunt, who could only hit us with Surf, and Shiftry, who only has 1 attacking move. To beat Cacturne and Absol, I would need to rely on some luck, but not as much as I first thought. So I looked up the Pokemon that can learn Torment and Double Team, and I saw a handful of Ghost Pokemon. While I believe this could be done with any of them, I decided to go with Gastly, because of its speed and low HP, forcing the opponents to attack instead of using support moves, which may sound strange, like why would I want them to attack, but you'll see why. So after carefully planning for the rest of the Elite Four members and the champion himself, I finally had a strategy I was confident with. So I traded over a Gastly from Fire Red and started breeding it for a decent nature and stats. The only stat that really mattered was the speed stat, because if I could be faster than the first Pokemon of any trainer, that would give me a huge advantage. After calculating all the XP I would earn from the battles, I figured out I would need at least 11 speed IVs to outspeed Wailord at the end, unless I used a speedy nature, but it would be beneficial to be able to deal some damage towards the end, so I went with a modest nature. I named him Spookachu and taught him Substitute from the Lilycove City move tutor, Double Team, Toxic, and Torment. Finally, I gave PP ups to keep him from running out of moves too fast, and 10 Carbos and Calcium for 100 EVs to speed and special attack, which would reach the breakpoints I needed and make it strong enough to do decent damage, as I wanted to swap out Toxic for an attacking move later. I also made sure to bring dozens of Leppa berries and potions. With Bright Powder equipped, I was ready to take on the challenge once again, more confident than ever before. Let's see if the level 5 Spookachu has what it takes to beat the Elite Four. After a few attempts, Mariana missed his Crunch, allowing me to set up my Torment. He would now be forced to use a different attack, but because he can't hit me with Double Edge, he would have to go for a Sand attack or Roar. Roar wouldn't do anything when there's only 1 Pokemon, so he goes for Sand attack. This allows me to set up Substitute, which will help me survive their Crunch every other turn. Now I would simply Substitute whenever they would take it down, and either set up Double Teams or X-Speeds, or heal whenever I get low. Each Double Team increases my evasion stage by 1, up to 6 times. So after using 6 Double Teams, their attacks with 100% accuracy would now only have 33% accuracy. On top of that, we have the Bright Powder, reducing it further. I needed to set up 5 X-Speeds to outspeed Shiftry. After setting up for a while, I was ready to take out Mariana, but I couldn't just use Toxic at any point. I also needed to calculate which turn they would faint on, because I wanted to make sure they fainted on the turn they couldn't attack, so I could safely heal or set up a new sub before their next Pokemon. Their Pokemon would faint in 6 turns, but they would also use full restore at some point, a couple of times. It took some time figuring out the timing, but eventually I learned to always use Toxic on the turn they would attack. After about 10 minutes, their first Pokemon was defeated. This would take us up to level 13, and at level 13, with our X speed stacks, we would now outspeed the Shiftry, even with the insane level gap. Just like Mariana, I set up Torment as they go for their attack. I needed to wait a turn before starting to Toxic, to make sure it would faint on the turn they couldn't attack. So I used an X accuracy to revert the accuracy drop I got from Mariana's Sand attack. But it proved useful as Shiftry loved setting up Double Team as well. I was unfortunate that Shiftry was able to land the extra sensory right before going down, but at least I still have a lot of HP to work with, because this is where the real danger starts. Seeing that I have evasion stacks, Cacturn will go for Feint Attack as often as it can, because it never misses. Even when using Torment, it still has Needle Arm, which meant I had to keep a substitute up every other round for the Feint Attack, while hoping it would miss most of the Needle Arms. All this while healing, managing the PP, and waiting for the poison to take him out. I waited until he missed his Needle Arm to use Toxic, as I felt more safe having more HP before doing so. This battle went surprisingly well, and suddenly Cacturn was down. I wasn't able to sink the poison on Cacturn here, so I was lucky that he missed at the end. Next up is Crawdaunt, who is pretty straightforward. I set up Torment and stall it down using Toxic on the turn where they can attack us. Just like Mariana, Crawdaunt can only hit us every other turn because they can't use their 2 normal attacks on us. They decided to use the full restore on Crawdaunt, which was very good as it meant they would not use it on the more scary Absol waiting in the back, who also knows accuracy bypassing moves. Crawdaunt goes down. And here it is, just like Cacturn, Absol will relentlessly use its accuracy bypassing move, this time Aerial Ace. Since it also has another move that can hit, it's just as scary as Cacturn, especially as Sidney's last Pokemon. Luckily, Rocky Slide has a base accuracy of 90%, which helps a lot. A few turns later, it was over. We beat Sidney, and we were level 22. Although the level difference was smaller, it was still no advantage other than not having to set up as many X speeds. We heal up and restore our PP. It was time for Pheobe, the trainer that had previously shut down our Smeargle with their sleep-immune Banette. It was probably the trainer I feared the most, as she has 3 Pokemon with accuracy bypassing moves, where 2 of them also have other moves that can hit us, making it possibly even harder than Sidney. Torment would not work as well on Pheobe, so this is where I swapped it out for Attract, which would be my next secret weapon, and the reason I chose the male gender for Gastly. I also swapped out Bright Powder for Leftovers, since lowering accuracy didn't help much here, and Leftovers would allow me to use Substitute more times before healing. With Attract up on turn 1, we had a 50% chance to survive if they got infatuated. Otherwise, they will attack with Shadow Punch, which also never misses. I set up a substitute and started trying to reach max evasion stacks with Double Team. It would take some time knowing that they would always hit us around 50% of the time, and the fear was that they would hit multiple times in a row to where my substitute could no longer be made. Substitute needs 25% of the total HP to be made, and if my HP drops lower than this, it's over. So every time I got low, I would have to heal up and hope they would fall in love at least one time to let me heal back up. I was finally able to poison Dusclops and started setting up double teams for their next Pokemon. I needed 2 X-Speeds to outspeed their Banette, and now I was almost ready for their next Pokemon. Luckily, they heal up, allowing me to set up a little bit longer. Unfortunately, they landed 3 Shadow Punches in a row, leaving me with no substitute, low health, and only 3 stacks of Double Team. This was looking rough. It was now a 50-50 whether I would live or not. And they would go for Feint Attack any chance they got. Luckily, they let me have a few turns to heal back up, and I started poisoning them as soon as possible, as the longer they lived, the more chances they had to hit Gastly multiple times in a row. Setting up Double Team was not a priority right now, as only a couple of their Pokemon would be affected by it. Banette went down relatively fast, and in came their next Banette. This one luckily has no Feint Attack, and should be much easier to deal with, as they not only have to pass the 50% chance of being infatuated, but also land their attacks. I poisoned them as soon as I had the chance and started stacking up my double teams again. I simply used some potions to save power points of my moves and waited for their next Pokemon. They did land 1 hit, which was unfortunate, but overall this one was easy. Now it's time for their other Dusclops, who also do not know any accuracy bypassing moves. With max evasion stacks and Attract, this one should be easy. Just because there was nothing better to do, I decided to use X accuracy to boost my chances of landing Toxic on the upcoming Sableye. They were able to land an attack, but it was okay as I got a new substitute and fully healed up before Sableye. Now our chances of winning this battle were looking really good. If, however, they were able to knock out my sub right before they fainted, it would be a 50-50, like we saw with the Banette. Leading with a substitute against Sableye allows me to safely use Attract, and I can just spam substitute 4 to 5 times in a row until they get infatuated. They scare me with a couple of feint attacks, but as soon as I get the chance I use Toxic and hope they miss at least one more time within the next few turns so I can heal back up. Sableye hits us with quite a few feint attacks, but when it finally do miss, I heal back up and now I feel pretty confident that I made it through, until they hit again and again with their feint attacks, and I almost get worried until they miss and I heal back up. Now there was no way for them to win. Even if they landed all their next moves, Sableye was done, and I got my revenge on Pheobe. Gastly evolves now, which is well deserved for taking out 2 Elite 4 trainers after literally just being hatched into this world, but I couldn't allow him to evolve just yet. If you remember from earlier, I mentioned that if they are able to take us out with a one-hit KO, they will always go for an attack instead of their support moves. Well, if I evolved Gastly here, Celio would not be able to take me out with one Ice Ball unless they got a critical hit, which means they would not only use Hail, but also Encore, which bypasses the substitute. Encore would force me to use the same move for multiple turns, which would be a disaster. Being able to get Confuse Ray after their first Pokemon was also a nice way to deal more damage, ending the fight earlier, as they were lacking accuracy bypassing moves. In Gen 1 to 6, Confusion has a 50% chance to take effect, but it only lasts 2 to 5 turns. So it meant I would have to reapply it every now and then. We also needed to get rid of Attract before Drake, as their Pokemon are male. After successfully setting up 6 double teams and 2 X speeds, I was ready to poison them again right as they went for a full restore. Now I just spammed double team to wait out turns, and Celio was out. As Gastly leveled up, he learned Confuse Ray with perfect timing for the rest of their team. Glacia stood little chance here and was taken out quickly with the combination of Poison and Confusion. The next Glacia is able to put up more of a fight, hitting me with Shadow Ball, but was also quickly taken out. The hardest part now for Glacia was to remember to keep my PP restored so I wouldn't accidentally run into a new Pokemon with 0 PP left on substitute. The second Celio comes in and surprisingly lands a couple of Blizzards, even with a base 70% accuracy. They use a full restore, but after that it's just a waiting game for my Gastly. Finally, it was time for their Walrein, who leads off strong with a connecting Ice Beam. Fortunately for me, the evasion stacks are simply too high for them to have a good chance of hitting me multiple times in a row, and as soon as they miss a couple of times, they are back to square one. Walrein goes down and we allow Gastly the well-deserved evolution into Haunter. It was now time to change up the game a bit. Champion Wallace has Tentacruel, who is a poison type. Poison types are immune to the poison effect, so I had to find a different move before then. But being a Haunter level 31, we were starting to get enough special attack to deal some damage as well. I removed Toxic for TM Psychic, as there was simply no better option for a different TM against the remaining 2 trainers. In Gen 3, Shadow Ball is a physical attack, and our physical attack is just not as good as our special. And even with the stab bonus giving us 50% more damage to Shadow Ball, Psychic was still stronger for most of their Pokemon, and had a 10% chance of lowering their special defense further. So I swapped out Toxic for Psychic to start dealing damage that way. It was time for Drake, the Dragon Trainer. Since Shelgon can one-hit KO Haunter, I had to rely on a 50% chance it would hit itself in Confusion so I could survive turn 1. I was able to pull through and started setting up Substitute and Double Team like any other fight, but this time I also wanted to maximize my damage with 6x specials, so I could take out their Pokemon faster with Psychic. Drake's scariest Pokemon here was Altaria, because it knew Aerial Ace, which would never miss. I also needed 2 X speeds to outspeed Salamence later, their fastest Pokemon. Altaria could also be scary if they used Dragon Dance enough to outspeed us, but since I was within KO range, they were programmed not to do that. Finally, after I was done setting up X specials, fully healed and behind a substitute, I was ready to end Shelgon and took it out with just 1 Psychic. They did surprise me with an early Salamence, as I was expecting Altaria, but alright. 1 Psychic and it was down to less than 50% HP. Another Psychic and bye bye Salamence. At this point, I probably didn't even need to use Confuse Ray, but I felt a sense of security in doing so. Flygon almost goes down in 1 hit, and shortly after, his Altaria. I led with Confuse Ray, although looking back it probably was better to simply take it out in 2 hits, but I was kinda hoping I could stay behind a sub before their last Pokemon, Kingdra. I start with the sub and rely on them to miss. They hit 2 serves in a row, starting to scare me a little, but as soon as they missed I spammed Psychic, knowing I would take them out in 2 hits, ending the battle. See you later, Drake. We were now level 35 and ready for the last battle. Could it really work? Looking at their team, they had no accuracy bypassing moves and no scary abilities. The hardest part right now was to live the 50-50 against Wailord, and to set up without them landing too many moves in a row. I led with Confuse Ray as they missed their Blizzard. I set up a double team as soon as I got the chance, keeping my substitute up anytime it broke. Wailord hit multiple times, taking me down to the point where I would lose if they hit again. They break through the confusion, but luckily miss. I heal up just enough with my leftovers to be able to use 1 more substitute. They snap out of confusion and hit another Blizzard. It was now back to a 50-50 with my next Confuse Ray, and they end up hurting themselves in confusion. That was close. I'm still not sure if it was the best decision, but I ended up going for another double team here instead of healing, as I hoped they would stay confused a bit longer. Of course they managed to break out of it, but luckily missed their next water spout. I now had to go for another Confuse Ray, and they luckily hit themselves in confusion. I had now passively healed enough with leftovers to use another substitute, leaving me at 4 HP. But as stubborn as this Wailord was, they refused to lose just yet. Wailord snapped out of confusion and uses Rain Dance? It turned out they had already used up all their PP on both Water Spout and Blizzard, and they only had Rain Dance and Double Edge left. Being a ghost type with normal immunity, they were forced to use Rain Dance. You can imagine the look on my face when I realized this, being so close to dying multiple times. So I set up the remaining double teams and start to boost my damage with the X special. I had to make them faint before they started to struggle, which would hit through my ghost typing. Finally, I finished setting up and it was time for a sweep. Wailord went down in 2 hits. Whiscash goes down in 2 hits as well. Tentacruel barely hangs on and heals up, but inevitably goes down. Ludicolo, 2 hits. I set up Confuse Ray on each Pokemon just as another layer of protection, which probably isn't necessary at this point. With a lucky critical hit, Gyarados goes down in 1 attack, and it was time for their final Pokemon, Milotic. They break out of confusion and hit us twice in a row. 3rd turn they missed, and it was time to put them to rest. They hit us 1 final time, but it was too late. I finished them off with 1 last Psychic, and that was it. I had finally done it. I finally beat the challenge I thought wouldn't be possible 1 year ago. 1 move made this possible, and it was Torment. allowing me to set up on Sidney. Imagine the one move nobody ever used before being the one move I needed to make this work after days of theory crafting. 2 years ago, I beat the Elite Four with a level 36 Slacking, then a year after I did it with a level 20 Linoon, and now finally with a level 5 Gastly, the lowest level possible in Generation 3. Unless, I mean, you could technically catch a Pokemon in the first route that is level 2. Yeah, that's not happening. Or? Let me know what I should try next, and I'd appreciate you taking 1 second of your time to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more Pokemon challenges. See you in the next one!